Hey everybody. So today we're going to take a look at a lightsaber that was made for the 1977 Star Wars A New Hope movie, but wasn't actually used in the movie. So this was actually like a leftover piece. So oftentimes when there is a main prop or a key prop in a movie, they will make several of them, anywhere between, I don't know, say 3 to 30 of them, depending on how many they need, what they need the prop to do, if the prop has a special function, any particular one, or, and then they always have backups too, in case one gets, lost, stolen, damaged, or whatever. This way they don't have to hold up production and they have extras. And that's what this one ended up being. This was an extra leftover one. So I got this, oh gosh, I'm trying to figure out when I got it. It's been so long. It was probably somewhere between, I would say, maybe late 77 to around 1980. I just really don't know. It's been such a long time. But I got this from a gentleman who used to do, he was like the promotion or organizer of conventions here in town. And here where I live, we were actually one of the earliest cities to have conventions, sci-fi conventions. And so this gentleman that I knew a lot of celebrities, a lot of people that work behind the scenes, because he had all the connections. And so I got this from somebody that he knew that worked on the movie. And so anyway, so this piece is, at least probably 40 some years old now. And so, yeah, this was a leftover one. It wasn't used in the movie. And so one thing though is that I always kick myself about is that this does not look the way it did when I first got it. So over the years, probably within the first, I don't know, 20 years that I had it, the grips that were on here, the original grips, they were made of like a spongy material. It was like a sponge or a foam, and you could tell that the prop guys had actually cut it to have like this T shape on here, and it was just made of like a foam. And over the years, 3 or 4 of them had started to deteriorate, and you could see, like, they're kind of coming apart or chipping apart, and the glue that was on there was starting to yellow and flake off. And so unfortunately, being just a kid back then, I was just a young teenager when I got it, but nobody knew props would be significant or collectible or worth anything back in the day. They were just things that the movie companies used and made, and afterwards they would just pitch them when they were done, or they would end up going floating in the wind somewhere. Although I think George Lucas did keep a lot of stuff from Star Wars. He was smart enough to do that, but I know a lot of these got out somewhere. And so I ended up replacing the grips that were on here. So I found some grips that looked similar to these, and unfortunately I tore off the old grips, the spongy ones, and then put the other ones on there. And then years later I found these which looked more accurate and took the other ones off and put these on. So this is actually the 3rd set of grips that have been on this lightsaber. So yeah, if I had known better, if I had known back in the day that you want to leave props, in their original state, I would have done it. But like I said, none of us, I didn't know anything back then, and nobody knew back then to do that. It's just not something that was thought of. So one of the other things that I had changed, but this was okay to change. So I was talking to the gentleman that worked on the movie, and he was telling me that this piece, okay, so this is a Texas Instruments calculator bubble strip. And this is actually a replica. This is not an actual one. The original piece that was on there was this. It was some kind of a weird little striped thing. And the guy told me that he did not put this piece on there. He doesn't even know how it ended up on there. But all it is a piece of plastic with some really old tape on here now. I mean, this tape is 40 some years old now. And he said he doesn't know how it was on there. For many years, I had this on here because I didn't know that it was supposed to have one of these. And interestingly enough, I actually had an original Texas Instruments calculator bubble strip. I'm totally dating myself here now, but so when calculators first came out, it was this big deal. It was like, wow, we actually have this little box that can do math for us now. And I thought it was really cool. And of course, I was so curious about it that I just had to take one apart and see what was inside. And then that's when I saw one of these. And what this actually was is the little numbers that were inside of a calculator. They were these tiny little red LED segmented LEDs to make the numbers. Well, they were really small, and so they would have this this thing inside. And what these actually did is it would magnify, these little bubbles would magnify the numbers so you could see them better. And I remember I kept that piece for many years. I had no idea that I should have held on to it, because of the significance of it, to have an original, bubble strip piece for for a lightsaber, because I didn't know. And so I wish I kept it. I have no idea where it is now, but but that's what that was. This is a replica piece that I got a while back to replace this thing, because I didn't like this thing. I wanted it to look more accurate. And so as far as these things being made of sponge, so I think the reason that those were made of sponge is several years ago I was watching a show on TV, and there was this guy that would go around looking for props that he could, buy from whoever currently owned it and then resell them and make money on it. And he came upon a guy that had two of the lightsabers from A New Hope. And his, actually, instead of the foam things, he actually had, all his had were black strips of felt on here. And so they were discussing, why there was felt pieces on there versus the rubber grips on here. And when they were talking about it, it all made sense to me too. And so I think what it is that these grips are actually very uncomfortable to hold. When you are holding these, they actually kind of start to hurt your hands after a while. They're very uncomfortable. And so it's possible, and more than likely, that Mark Hamill or the stunt person, complained that they were uncomfortable to hold and they would start to hurt your hands after a while. So the prop guys were finding alternate ways of making it more comfortable. And so it's very possible that the ones that that guy had and the one I had were made for, maybe stunt purposes or, just to make them more comfortable. Maybe not necessarily for close-ups. This would probably not be a hero prop. But that's more than likely the reasoning why mine had the sponge pieces on there. So I found that very interesting, and once I saw that TV show, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense as to why the ones I have were made of sponge. So for those who are unfamiliar with the prop of the lightsaber, what these actually were they were Graflex flash attachments. They were actually a piece of camera equipment, and so the prop guys, I mean, if you watch these old black and white movies where they show a reporter, he'll have these big clunky cameras, and it takes like two hands to hold this thing. And if you look, he'll have this thing will be on the side. Now, it was actually up and down. Let me pull out here a little. Oops, go this way here. But now it would be up and down like this on the side of the camera, and this would clamp onto, minus the bubble strip, of course, but this part would clamp onto the side of the camera, and then I think there was a cable or something attached to here, and I think this had 3 D-cell batteries in it. And so I'm not a camera expert or photography expert, but I think how it worked was the photographer would take the picture and push this button at the same time, and inside this little spot here was a flash bulb, and the bulb would go off, and then he'd take the bulb out, and you always see them kind of bouncing it in their hands because it was hot, and he'd put it in the little bag on his waist, and he'd take another fresh bulb out and put it in here, and there's this little spongy thing in here. And that's how they would take pictures back in the day. I mean, that was just the way they did it. And so this thing would have a dish over it, like a metal dish that would reflect the light out. And so somehow the prop guys in Star Wars decided to turn this into a lightsaber. So all they did was take that dish off, add some rubber grips onto the bottom here, put a piece of a Texas Instruments calculator on there, and poof, you got yourself a lightsaber. So that's how they made this piece. And then, so it was made by the Graflex company, as you can see here. And the Graflex company, I think they were around in the 30s. I'm not 100% positive. And so, of course, they're long since gone. I mean, that company went out of business a long time ago. It's like, here, let me focus in on there. But yeah, so they're long since gone. And so, of course, these things have become super, super collectible now. And so, I had a friend that was a photography guy. He was really into photography, and he would tell me that he would find these Graflex flash attachments at camera shows and stuff like that. And the guys that would be at the dealer's tables selling this stuff, they would absolutely refuse to sell these Graflex pieces to anybody that was going to convert it into a lightsaber. They were like, this is an antique piece of camera equipment. If you're just going to sit here and destroy it by turning it into a lightsaber, I'm not going to sell it to you. Well, cut to today, Now these things have become, like $600 or $800, whatever they're fetching now. They fetch a pretty hefty price. And so, of course, the attitude has changed now, and they're like, oh yeah, you want to turn it into a lightsaber? Go right ahead. What the heck? And it's a quick $600 for them, $800, whatever they're selling it for. So it's funny how the attitude changed about that. So, but anyway, yeah, that's what the original prop was made of, and you can even see Graflex here on the side. So, yeah, so in case you weren't familiar with what the lightsaber was, that's what it was. Now, I remember bringing this to the movie theaters. The movie was still in theaters when I had this, and being the geek, my friends and I were such geeks. We would go to the theater like once a week to go see the movie, sometimes twice. We couldn't get enough of Star Wars. It was such a huge deal when it first came out, and so we'd go to the theater any chance we could to go see the movie, and I'd bring this with me because I wanted to compare it, on screen. I would say, especially the scene where Obi-Wan first gives Luke the lightsaber, you kind of get a decent look of it. And I would look at it and say, okay, well, there's a bump right here, and that's actually the little button. This is actually a little button on here that pushes. And these little things, they'd call them rabbit ears. It's like, okay, those things are there, and there's a lens right here. And so it was just kind of funny. I would compare it. So anyway, one time we were in the theater. We were in the lobby, and we were waiting for a ride home because it was before we could drive. And so while we were waiting in the lobby, I had this, in my hand, and some guy kind of randomly walks up to us and he goes, "Is that what I think it is?" And my friend goes, "Yeah." He goes, "It's a lightsaber." He goes, "And it was made for the movie." And I said, "But it wasn't used in the movie." I had to clarify it to the guy. And he goes, "Really?" And so he was checking it out, and he was looking at it, and I was telling him, how it's a piece of camera equipment and explaining what it was. And he was really examining it, and he goes, "Wow." He goes, "Well," he goes, "now that I know what it is," he goes, "it kind of takes the magic out of it, doesn't it?" And so we were all laughing about it because we thought it was pretty funny, because we were pretty much the only people that was watching the movie back then that knew that Luke Skywalker was wielding around a piece of a camera. So we always got a kick out of that. It was pretty funny. So, props back in those days, they weren't thought of the way they are today. I mean, like I mentioned, they were just things that they used in a movie, and they didn't think twice about it. And once they were done, they were done. But anyway, I think of course now these things have become super collectible. But I remember I would run into the guy that I got this from. Probably in the last 20 years after I had gotten this, and he would periodically, we'd bump into each other, and he goes, "Hey, do you still have that lightsaber?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And he's like, "Would you ever consider selling that back to me?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, he goes, "I should have never let you have that." And I said, "Why did you?" He goes, "I had no idea that it would be such a significant piece or worth any money." Now, I don't know if this is worth any money or not. It was never used in the movie. I mean, yeah, it's cool that it was made by probably the production company, or the production company, messed around with this or whatever. But as far as like value-wise, I don't know if it's actually worth anything. More than anything, the value is in the Graflex piece itself, because like I mentioned, it's a highly sought-after piece that Star Wars fans want, because they want to make a lightsaber of their own out of an original actual Graflex flash attachment. So, for that part, it's probably worth a lot more. And unfortunately, like I said, I kicked myself for changing the grips on here. Now, I wish, I don't know what kind of condition they'd be in now. I mean, we're talking 40 plus years now. But this has been in a display case for many years, and so those grips probably would have held up just fine. So I probably should have just left it alone. But like I said, I was just a young teenager, didn't know any better. Nobody knew back then. Nobody knew that any of this stuff would be of any significance. And so, and another thing I wish I would have done is when I bumped into the guy that worked in the movie, the last time I saw him, I should have gotten some kind of a letter from him, like a quote unquote certificate of authenticity, or some kind of letter from him saying, yes, I was part of the production team of A New Hope. I don't think he worked on Empire Strikes Back. I'm trying to remember. It's been a long time, but I don't think he worked on that one. But, I should have gotten some kind of letter from him saying, yeah, I worked on it, and some kind of letter of provenance to, help back up this piece, because as it is now, I don't have anything. And so, but like I said, once again, we weren't thinking of stuff like that. There were no certificates of authenticity back then, because it just wasn't a thing. So, the things we could have, the things we know now that we should have known then, that kind of thing. So, you know how that goes. So now I wanted to show you this replica. This one here is a replica, and it was based on the sequel trilogy that just came out, the last three movies, and so this is based on that. And so I have quite a few lightsabers in my collection. Most all of them are replicas, except for the one back there, of course. But this one here, so I got this from, I've had this for about a year or more, and or a couple of years now. And so there was a guy that was making these out of the Corbanth kits. There's a company called Corbanth that makes these, and they are really, really well done. I mean, these, I don't know how they do it, but they make the whole metal part that looks like the Graflex piece, and it looks really good. They have the lens, they have the plugins. I mean, it looks just like the real deal. And so I never had a lightsaber that had the notches in the grips. In Empire Strikes Back, seems like every time you saw the lightsaber, it would change in some way, shape, or form. And so in Empire Strikes Back, all of a sudden now the grips have these little notches cut out of them. And I never had a lightsaber with the notches. And then they had, I think it was either rivets like this or it was screws. I don't know which. I'm not an expert on this prop as much as I'd like to be. So, but anyway, I never had one with the notches, so I definitely wanted to get one. And this one also has the correct looking circuit, panel that goes in here, because they changed it from the bubble strip to this circuit thing, I think. Anyway, I'm not sure, but this is how it looked in the sequel anyway. And then also this one has kind of like the, you can kind of see it's kind of got this brass kind of tinted or kind of a goldish tinted band right there. So they got, that's how it's supposed to look. And so they did that right. The only thing that's not quite right, as far as what I can tell, is the angle of these curves isn't quite the same as, like, you see on the original. Let me see if I can get them to side by side. But you can kind of see how they're a little bit different. I think this one is a little bit longer or something, while this one's a little bit shorter. And then also, these are called the rabbit ears. The rabbit ears on the replica are taller than the original. So that's the only thing I can kind of see that's not quite right. But the button looks pretty good. I think that's one part that is hard to get, because I think it's hard to find these. This is a little switch that goes up and down. This one's kind of hard to turn. And then I think there's actually a light behind the lens that lights up, and there's a light behind the original, as far as I know. I've never put batteries in the original. So yeah, but there's all kinds of weird little details on here. This one also has the springy piece in here where the old flash bulbs used to go. So as far as like accuracy, it's pretty spot on to how the original Graflexes look. And you can find these, I mean, unfortunately now, well, I mean, no, it's probably good actually. Lightsabers are a dime a dozen on eBay. I mean, you can buy these things by the ton, and there's different companies like Master Replicas that made replicas of the lightsaber, as well as EFX and all these other companies. And I have some of the Master Replicas ones as well. This one here has the D-ring on it. This one never had a D-ring on it, so I'm assuming they either never finished this prop or they had not intended it to have one. Maybe it was supposed to be a stunt version and that would have gotten in the way. I would love to know the story of this thing. I would love to know how many of these were made for the movie, how many of them never got used in the movie, how many of these, were just kind of left over, and what happened to them. They all just went off into the wind somewhere and are in private hands. This one here, it was just a fluke that I got this piece. I was at the right place at the right time, meeting the right people, and thankfully I got this. And I was just a kid back then, and like I said, I didn't think much about it. I mean, I loved the movie, and it was cool to have a Luke Skywalker, quote unquote, Luke Skywalker lightsaber. But I didn't really realize, how important it was. Neither did the guy that I got it from, obviously, like I mentioned. And so, it's just so crazy to think about, all these years have passed and how this thing has become so significant now. But yeah, there's like a whole bunch of these you can buy now, and this one's made so that you can put electronics in it and have the sound effects, and you can add a blade to it. And it's just really cool. I mean, they've come a long, long way with this stuff. But, I always laughed about the fact that, my friends and I knew what this actually was all those years ago, and it took many decades before people really knew what this was made of. And to me, it was not a big deal, because I already knew that a long time ago. It's just so bizarre. The whole thing is just so bizarre to me. But anyway, all right, well, I thought you'd get a kick out of looking at this piece. It's the very first prop I ever got. This is the piece that got me on this path of collecting props, and it was the very first piece in my collection, and I've had it for 40 years probably, and or plus maybe more than that. I wish I could remember. It's been so long, but it's just such a cool piece, and I thought you'd be interested in seeing it, even though it's not a screen used piece, and even though sadly I altered it. Oh gosh, I wish I wouldn't have messed with it, but what are you going to do, I guess? All right, well, anyway, that's the history of this piece, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe if you'd like. I'd appreciate it, and I will see you on the next video, whatever that may be. So thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.